My name is Mary Claire Collins Powell, as I would have been known, and as a grandniece of Michael Collins, I'm briefed to give you glimpses of Michael Collins through the prism of the family's remembrances. A decade of commemoration has just begun, and this morning's memorable and momentous ceremony exemplified this amazingly well. It commemorated the 90th anniversary of the handover of the James Stephens military barracks by the Crown Forces to Saoirse Éireann. Between 1912 and 1922, huge social, political and economic changes had taken place. A free state was established in the 26 counties, and in 1922, albeit the Government of Ireland Act of 1920 was passed by the House of Commons, a parliament which provided for two home rule parliaments, one in Belfast to govern the six northeastern. Is there a problem? No. The 6 northeastern counties, and one in Dublin to govern the remaining 26 counties. In May 1921, general elections to the two Irish parliaments were held, as per the Government of Ireland Act. Craig got his home rule, and King George V opened the Northern Ireland Parliament on the 22nd of June 1921. I'll begin by saying that the rules of thumb for assessing any character usually are what others say about him, and what he says himself, and of course his legacy, which in Michael Collins's case are the perceptions and impressions, the spillover of his pragmatic hopes and visions. Michael Collins is well served in terms of biographies. I believe there are at least 49. In addition to that, we have several documentaries and a film by Neil Jordan that told the story of Michael Collins to the world. He was a complex person who had the knack of making himself all things to all men and of leaving people with the view of him that he wanted them to have. I suppose that's where the spirit of Michael Collins emanates from. Vladimir Ilyich Lenin famously remarked, "There are decades when nothing happens, and there are weeks when decades happen." History consists of a corpus of ascertained facts. But hindsight, processed history, has always been the intractable problem child of the historian. Recently, Julian Barnes, in his book, The Sense of an Ending, incidentally this year's Booker's Prize winner, lets a pivotal character tell us that history is that certainty produced at the point where the imperfections of memory meet the inadequacies of documentation. So history has to be constantly rescued from perception, anecdote, and it depends who you're talking to. My grandmother, Mary Collins, was born in 1882 and attempted to write her memoirs in the mid-1950s, prompted by her granddaughter, Joan McCarthy, who was then in primary school. Young Joan was asked in class, "Does anyone know, or has anyone ever heard of Michael Collins?" And she put up her hand and said, "I did. He's my granny's brother, and he died for Ireland." Mary Collins recalls that she and her older sister Hannah, who was born in 1879, were often in charge of baby Michael. And Hannah used to say that Michael was born for their edification. One day, while they were playing in the kitchen loft, Michael suddenly disappeared. He had fallen through the trapdoor, and with typical Michael Collins luck, he fortunately had a soft landing in the kitchen below. Mary tells another story about the infant Michael. All had gone to the local fair and I was in charge. I had forgotten to get potatoes for dinner. I went outside to the garden to get potatoes, and there I found 4-year-old Michael, who had managed to dig a large bucketful. He was just 4.5 when he came under the patriotic influence of Dennis Lyons, the headmaster of Lissavard National School, an IRB man, and for a time the local recruiting officer. His grandson, Tom Lyons, has written extensively and movingly on his grandfather's interest and influence on young Michael. In fact, his entire youth in Woodfield seems to have been a record of influences guiding and shaping him for the work which lay ahead. His family background, his father, Michael John, who was born in 1815, and his mother, Mary Ann, known for her strength of character, her many kindnesses, and the charismatic Collins and the characteristic Collins' religious tolerance. Her Protestant neighbours laid her out when she died in 1907. Others to influence Michael Collins were Jim Slattery, the local blacksmith, Patrick O'Driscoll, his brother-in-law, who honed his writing skills in the offices of the West Cork People, John Crowley and John Blewett in their school in Clonakilty. All these initially shaped the young Michael Collins, who was to write his name indelibly on the pages of Irish history and move through those same pages with the stride and poise of Apollo. Michael's mother decided he should follow his sister Hanny into the British Postal Services. When Michael was 15, he passed the post office entrance exam, and in July 1906, he left Clonakilty to take up a position as boy clerk in the West Kensington Post Office. He stayed with his older sister Hannah for 9.5 years, mostly at 5 Netherwood. He attended King's College, where he passed the advanced civil service exams. His essays are actually held in the UCD National Archive and can be viewed there. His craving for knowledge was insatiable, and he read endlessly English literature. I happen to have a cross-section of Hanny's books, which include Scott, Dickens, Arnold Bennett, Tennyson, Hardy, Eliot, Conrad, Yeats, and of course Shaw. He copies extracts from Shaw's The Man of Destiny to carry around in his wallet. Often his brother Patrick sent money from Chicago for Christmas. He bought one Christmas in 1906, he bought Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, said to be his favourite book. The book bears his name, Michael Collins, and is dated 1906. Hanny took him into the homes of her English friends, who became his friends, for example, the Laverys. She also saw to it that Michael at least understood the English way of life. In November 1909, he joined the IRB and was sworn in by Sam Maguire, a native of Dunmanway. He also worked in the post office. Michael had great time for Sam Maguire, whose name is immortalised on the All-Ireland football trophy. Michael would frequently challenge him to wrestling bouts and would playfully call him, "You bloody South of Ireland Protestant." He could call them that because his two uncles were beaten up because they lent their treasure to their Protestant neighbours. And his father was well known for helping with the harvest on a Sunday. At this time, he also befriended Joe O'Reilly, who defended and protected him to the end. He also joined the GAA club, the Geraldines, and he became their secretary at 17 years of age and held that position until he left London in January 1916. The following incident gives us a flavour of the strident and pragmatic side of his personality. His first yearly report to the club was a trenchant one. I quote, "Our internal affairs were saddening, but our efforts in football and hurling were perfectly heartbreaking. In conclusion, I can only say that our records for the past year leaves no scope for self-congratulation. Signs of decay are unmistakable. And if members are not prepared in future to act harmoniously together and more sacrificingly generally, the club will soon have faded into an inglorious and well-deserved oblivion." He left the Savings Bank in 1910, and albeit he passed the exams for a higher grade in the civil service, he took a position with stockbrokers Horner and Company, where he obtained good financial experience. In 1914, he moved to the Guaranty Trust Company, New York, and in Lombard Street, London, where he remained until the end of 1915. The Conscription Act, as already mentioned, came into force on the 16th of January 1916, and Michael left 5 Netherwood Road, London, the previous night. That was the 15th of January. Michael, like other IRB men, had received a summons from Sean McDermott to return to Dublin. Michael received his release from employment by telling his manager that he wished to go to join an Irish regiment. His manager congratulated him and allowed him to leave immediately, paying him an extra month's salary to enable him to take a holiday. Michael exchanged his cheque for gold in the Bank of England, and on arrival in Dublin, he handed the gold to Sean McDermott, who was laying aside a gold reserve. There's nothing left. At the end of January 1916, he wrote to his sister, Hanny, "I'm still in Dublin doing a very little bit, working 3 days a week as financial advisor to Count Plunkett, for which I get lunch each day and £1 per week. This place has many advantages over London. It's just lovely to see the mountains in the morning. My present job is at Kimmage, far out. Seems to be as remote as Woodfield, but it's only a short walk and a penny tram ride from the emerald pasture of College Green." Mary Joseph Plunkett recognised the potential revolutionary and took his spiel about spies and other things. He gave Michael Chesterton's book to read, The Man Who Was Thursday. Quote, "If you didn't seem to be hiding, nobody hunted you out." On the 23rd of February 1916, he took a temporary job with accountants Craig gardener in Dame Street. Then came the Easter Rising. Then followed the executions, and then Frongach. I'll read out two internment letters. One from Stafford. Prisoner number 49, F. Dear Hanny, here I am, fairly well, and not more low-spirited than the circumstances compel. We've only been just given permission to write, and naturally I choose you as the victim of my production. Positively, you have no idea what it's like. The dreadful monotony, the heart-scalding, eternal brooding on all sorts of things, thoughts of friends dead and living, especially those recently dead. And above all, the time, the horror of the day in which it refuses to pass. Perhaps you would kindly send me a few good books, good and long novels in cheap editions. And if still in the flat, Heath's Practical French Grammar or some such book, all letters will be censored. It is only with utmost efforts that I can concentrate my thoughts or be at all rational. I seem to have lost acquaintance with myself and with people I knew. Oscar Wilde's Reading Jail keeps on coming up. You remember, all that we know who be in jail. Michael. Then another one. Irish prisoner number 1320, Hut 7, Upper Internment Camp, Frongach, Bala. My dear Hanny, arrived here yesterday after a journey through a most engaging country, which was the only pleasant part of the proceeding. It is not as good as Stafford, and you know what I thought of that. He asks Hanny for a woolen vest and a pair of heavy, strong boots, size 9 with nails. The sentries in Frongach had bore an insignia Georgius Rex, and they were elderly and more or less unfit for active service in World War I. These were known among the prisoners as our guys as Gorgeous Rex. And the Gorgeous Rex had been warned that the men they guarded were dangerous insurgents who might wickedly tempt them with German gold. They didn't. They tempted them with cigarettes and a few things, but they did get their letters out. He knew there was going to be no one-off solution, and he rejected the idea of coercing the Northeast in submission. This perception is underpinned by the Government of Ireland Act and the setting up of the Parliament of Northern Ireland after the elections of 1921. There were 18 sparring letters between De Valera and Lord George, the last Liberal Prime Minister. In addition to this, there were 4 meetings on the 14th, 15th, 18th and 21st in July 1921. Lord George said of De Valera, dealing with him was like lifting mercury with a fork. Another opinion concerning Mr. De Valera's, or President De Valera's acuity was made by Sean MacBride in 1948. I'm just adding this in. On January the 1st, 1948, Mr. De Valera had stated that Mr. MacBride was a novice. And MacBride's riposte was, "I do not mind being referred to as a novice. Mr. De Valera is not a novice. He is a past master in the art of politics, and he's noteworthy for two things. Firstly, never answering a question he is asked, and secondly, for being able to weld a number of words together without their meaning anything." I haven't addressed, because they've already been dealt with and addressed by other lecturers, and will be, the 6.5 years of most important years: the general election of 1918, the dismantling of British intelligence in Ireland, the War of Independence, the truce, the treaty, and the Civil War. So I will keep to my brief, and will conclude with some comments on the impact of Michael's death. It cast, of course, a huge shadow over the Collins family. On the 21st of August 1922, my father, who was Chief of Staff in 1961, my father and my grandmother, Mary Collins, met in the Imperial Hotel, and he had a terrible cold, and they were trying to dissuade him from going further, and just to mind himself generally. And then again, all will recall the broken-hearted Johnny Collins leaning over the open coffin in City Hall. It reminded us all of Yeats, soldier, scholar, statesman, he, as it were, all life's epitome. What made us think he would comb grey hair? And of course, George Bernard Shaw, Bernard Shaw's letter to Hanny. This letter was written to Hanny on the 22nd of August 1922. Priors Field, Surrey, England, August 22. My dear Miss Collins, don't let them make you miserable about it. How could a born soldier die better than at the victorious end of a good fight, falling to the shot of another Irishman, a damned fool, but at the same an Irishman who thought he was fighting for Ireland, a Roman to a Roman. I met Michael for the first and last time on Saturday last, and I'm very glad I did. I rejoice in his memory, and will not be so disloyal as to snivel over his valiant death. So tear up your mourning and hang out your brightest colours in his honour, and let all praise God that he had not to die in a stuffy bed of a trumpery cough, weakened by age and saddened by the disappointments that would have attended his work had he lived. Sincerely, G. Bernard Shaw. Thank you very much.